Good morning, guys. Well, this video may be heavy, it may be not, and I hope everybody's staying safe. I am known as an essential worker as this crisis that shall not be named is going on. So I've been out almost every day, straight to work, straight to a grocery store, maybe, and straight home. And unfortunately, that gives me a lot of time to do a few things: work around the house, read a few books, catch up on a few comics, and pay attention to YouTube and Twitter. And what it is what it is. The beast is alive. The ball is rolling. The times have changed. And I could just very well be a guy sitting here complaining about the times. I don't know. Does that make me Archie Bunker? We'll see. But what's going on with comics nowadays? It's been building up for years, and what's been going on, literally, it breaks my heart. And with the way things are going on in the world, like I said, I'm an essential worker, as a social worker. There's much more important things going on out there. But the other side of this is I feel like the things that are going on where we have to stay home a lot more has caused people to really jump on line and take off on a lot of things. As I'm speaking right now, comic books have not being distributed by Diamond, and there's been this hashtag going around, pencils down, where a lot of the freelancers and a lot of people working comics are not working, not getting paid. I think we're 2 weeks in. We're starting on the third week of this. I think. I don't know. But there's plenty of videos out there you can go watch where people are documenting the stuff that's going on Twitter and what's been going on. Now, some of the things that got me thinking about this, I always tell you the setup where these ideas come from when I sit down and shoot a video. And one of the things I did is I tracked down a book from when I was a kid. Probably had this book in 1978. It's a child's book. I started school. They had a book fair. I got introduced to Troll Books. I think I'm good now. And I absolutely loved this book. And the title is just so simple. You know, the Book of Giant Stories, that I can't believe I couldn't find it. It was damaged in the mail and bent up and all this stuff. But this book actually came out in 1972. Illustrated by Philip Mix, and it's by a guy named David L. Harrison. And this really made me realize that it wasn't just comic books that grabbed me when I was a kid. I've always talked about reading. I mean, I've got some books here. I got them all over the place. But it was the story and the art combined that really blew my mind when I was a kid. I loved the stories. I loved art. I drew. This stuff made me want to pick up pencils and paper and crayons and markers, whatever I could grab, and maybe kind of draw, and then I'd go outside. And this was the era of the last golden age of childhood, I think, in real life, where you went outside and you stayed outside 7, 8, 9 in the morning, and you came home when the street lights came on. And I could tell many stories growing up like that. You had your bike. Your bike was life, or you walked, one of the two. And nowadays, whenever I get to talk about comics, believe it or not, even with what's going on out there, as many people that are staying home as there is, I ran into a guy who I referred to as a kid, and he was, he recognized me from the YouTube channel, which surprised me. A couple years ago, I wouldn't have, but nowadays I'm like, really, But he talked about he's been to comics for 8 years, and he was so proud of it. And if you're watching this, a big shout out to you. Put yourself in the comments. But 8 years was like a blink of the eye to me. I didn't really give him back that I was impressed with that, considering that I've been doing this for 43 years since I was 4. But 8 years is exactly the time that it seems like everything has built up for this Comicsgate stuff, the dark side of comics, if you will. I mean, I've been watching this show called The Dark Side of Wrestling, and I'm like, man, somebody could do this on comics for the last 10 years. And it's all well documented, especially now with the hashtag pencil down. But he has grown up in the era of part of the comic book collecting being online. Access to creators, YouTube videos, He's just grown up in a completely different era, wherein my idea of collecting comics back in my day was you jumped off the bus on a Wednesday, you got to the spinner racks, you hit as many drugstores or retail stores, grocery stores as you could, and you got the books. And then it was a very personal hobby. You did it at the house. There was a stigma of comics. Comics rotted your brain. They were for kids. They were garbage. People would actually pick on you. I've always talked about it like it was in a hilarious way. I've told stories about comics being my Vietnam and having two girls break up with me almost a year apart for finding my comics literally in the closet. And none of that really mattered because, I just like the stories and the art and reading. It was all personal. You sat down and it was you and the book. You would meet somebody 10, 12 years later if you've done this hobby long enough, and you could tell them about a book you read back 10, 12 years ago, and they would sit down and have the exact same experience 12 years later. That always blew my mind. You're in that world with the storytelling. And that's true for books, movies, or anything, is what I've really thought about. I didn't have to be taught that. It just sort of changed, you get introduced to an idea and you're like, oh, wow, that applies elsewhere. So when I was reading that book, it took me all the way back to days of having some of my books and then having my comic books, and a rainy day would hit on a Sunday. And, it's the time you got to play around and look at your stuff. And then, but today, this kid grew up exactly around the time, it might have been off by 2 years, but it was well known when Dan Slott first started attacking a fan online. And here it is 8 years later, maybe 10 years later, and that is still going on. I don't even know the guy's name off the top of my head right now. But some guy just told a bunch of fans told a fan and put it out there that to go ahead and eat a bag of pre-effed penises, if you will. And I was just like, oh God, they're still doing this. And if you do the hashtag pencils down and scroll through the results and stuff, you've seen people take tons of screenshots of the creators attacking people, and then the reasoning that they're saying that they're doing this is that they're running off customers, which I can say in real life is true, whether you like it or not, whether you're even if you don't know anything about Comicsgate, if you are pro Comicsgate, anti Comicsgate, sick of hearing about Comicsgate. It came from an honest place. Fans being told to go away and run them off and stuff, right? Now, we're in the middle of a situation here that cannot be named, but people are having to stay home. People are, in real life, or, you've got a lot of people who are insecure right now. When is this going to end? And things like that. And this is exactly the type of situation that comic books were used when you were younger. It was escapism. It was picking up a book and getting inside of a story and following it through, sequential art. You would have tons to read if you liked a book, or you would have tons of different stuff to write a book. And what I've been seeing when it comes to the hobby here lately, more than any time in the last couple of years of all this stuff going on, is the stigma of comics ended up becoming, I don't know what the word is. It was like it fulfilled a self-imposed destiny, if you will, because I grew up in a time where comic books were, the people who read comic books were growing up with comic books. We had people like Alan Moore and Frank Miller and stuff making comic books grow up, whether you liked it or not. I mean, check out Miracle Man from the 80s and stuff. And there was a lot of, integrity put into comics and stuff, a lot of sophistication put in there. It justified what they were and what they could be. Now I've seen grown men get on Facebook and get on Twitter and stuff, and it just blows my mind to see them having meltdowns and acting like 4-year-olds, screaming that there's no new comics. I've been collecting comics for so long, I can't believe they did this to me. It's very egocentric, and there's more important things going on in the world. It's one of the few things I think is very black and white in what is important. And these are also some of the same people that I have talked to in real life before, a few of them, or at least online. And I know for a fact that they have a back catalog of comics that is just unreal that they haven't read. So they have comics to read. And like I said, it almost feels silly to be talking about this, but it's the state of comics, and we'll see what's going on. Now, I don't want to go on too long, but one of the things that I'm talking about, how comics have changed, is I had a talk with Scott Shaw. He's the guy who worked on a book that's the most well-known book he's worked on is Captain Carrot: The Amazing Zoo Crew. And before you write this guy off for doing a funny animal book, this guy hung out with Jack Kirby in the 70s and stuff, right? He was a friend of Jack Kirby. The guy loved comics. And when I met him at a convention, one of the questions that he asked me was, how did I get into comics? And he asked if it was while I was in the hospital. Now, when I was 13 and had my appendix pretty much burst as soon as they took it out, like they were still traveling with it and it exploded. I was that close. A lot of people around town that I didn't know, that knew my grandmother and my mother and stuff, I got a ton of comic books for like a week. I mean, stacks like that thick. This is when they were probably 60 cents, maybe. I don't know. And you're sitting in there as a kid in a hospital, and you forget you're in the hospital, and you're sitting there just reading all these comics and all the colors and the joy and the superheroes and the cool things and the funny things and the lame things and stuff. You're in your own little world. Scott Shaw talked about how that's how he found comics, and he named a couple other creators. That's how they found comics, and a bunch of people he's talked to at conventions how they found comics. Hospitals would have the comics laying around. Barbershops would have the comic books laying around and stuff when the kids got bored. And that's probably where so it makes sense why people thought they were for kids. Now you fast forward years after that, and now they're in comic book shops, and a lot of the people you see talking about them are adults. But the difference is that online, the stigma of comics, the type of people that they said read comic books, people who lived in basements with their mothers. I hate to tell people that, but those people actually existed. But they were like one, if I could come up with a number, 1 in 1,000 or something, right? They were there, but they were very rare. And now comics have turned into things like that. Oh my God, we have the New Warriors by Gibble Smith and stuff, right? Kibble Smith, a millionaire who somehow got this horrendous comic book to come out called The New Warriors with Safe Space, Snowflake, Dora the Explorer, and all these other people's things are saying. And it was really the last time that comic books, especially Marvel, anything new gave me a huge emotional response. And I did this video that if I'd kept up, there's no doubt in my mind it would have had like a ton of views and stuff, because the videos that came out afterwards said a lot of the same things I did. We were on the same page. Maybe 137 people saw the video before I took it off because I felt like I acted like an idiot in it. I mean, it was the most atrocious thing I ever saw. And I'm like, that's where we're at now. You know what I mean? Here we are in the middle of history, the things that we have never seen in this country before, around the world, in our lifetime and stuff. And this would be the perfect time for people to rediscover comics, find things to read. You have the time to do it. Go outside, come in, read something. And what do we have? There's a few channels when I started this on YouTube. And it comes down to, I'm a dinosaur on here. I totally get that a lot of the stuff I do is sort of irrelevant, not important, and things have changed. But nobody's really talking about the comics anymore. I've said this before, and I stand by it, and that's what blows my mind. If the identity politics, which I say these things and I feel like it's dated. I feel like I'm talking about things from 3, 4, 5 years ago, and it blows my mind people are still talking about it. But I really wish, and there's a few comic book channels out there that still talk about comics. I'm not speaking for them. But to me, we started this out, it was really about the comics, and then friendships emerged and community and all this stuff. But we've had people walk away from the hobby. We have people who have given up on online stuff. I personally gave up on Marvel Comics back in, like, I don't know, October, November of last year. And I got to tell you, it really elevated the hobby again for me. It really did. You were happier. It was odd. You cut out this one company and you find this whole joy of comics again. Um, but there's not a lot of channels anymore that actually talk about the comics. It's like the comic books have been hijacked to have this big war on there where people are getting huge views. I've seen people, um, and I'm just talking about the state of thing. I'm not slamming these people. I mean, I'm not happy with it. It breaks my heart, but I'm not faulting anybody. That's not me covering my butt. It's just what it is. But there's been people who have been on YouTube for a while, and I saw them talk about movies and Hollywood and stuff. And then all of a sudden, these guys come on here and they're talking like they've collected comics for years and stuff, and they've got stuff on their walls that they bought at Hobby Lobby back when it was on sale in December. I saw the stuff and trying to validate themselves, and they're getting views for talking about comic book Twitter and how the creators are acting, and it's a symbiotic thing. It's a real symbiotic thing. A lot of these channels are depending on bad behavior, and it's not going to last forever. Um, and nobody's really talking about the comics. I can bring up comics of Wanda in A Game of You from the Sandman. I can bring up Boy from The Invisibles, both books from the 90s and stuff. The things that people want to include in comics have always been there, but they don't want to talk about it when you see it. They're more interested in the fight. And if this fight is so important for identity politics and all these things, why is it only in the entertainment? You know what I mean? Like, we're in the comic books. People complain about their comic books sucking, but nobody's really reading the comics, talking about the comics. I doubt a lot of the people actually have collections. These people, and that's what kills me. You can sit here and talk about comics and stuff, and the people who claim to love comics can't keep up in a conversation, don't know what you're talking about, or they're not interested. I totally get there's more things to talk about than comics, but if you're fighting some virtual war for comics, well, what do you want? What do you read? What books? How do you want them to go back? How to go forward? Where are these people at? Instead, we're talking about creators who've treated fans and stuff like that like crap, and now they're asking the same people to fund them, in ways that they laughed at and mocked that other people were doing. And yeah, I'm talking about Cyberfrogs. That by not really investing myself for the last couple years in what's been going on online, I really feel like I'm at a distance from it, and I can see the whole the big picture of it, and come up with like a very biased viewpoint. And it's reached a point where there's one side that is just, I wouldn't say that they're the good guys, but they've conducted themselves in a more adult manner, whether you like it or not, and kept a certain amount of integrity and humor with it, while the other people have just started going down on flames and coming off desperate and then lashing out and trying to be leaders in this and stuff. Well, it's too late. Internet is forever. People have long memories, and unfortunately, males, in my opinion, keep a grudge a lot longer than anybody else. You know what I mean? They keep a grudge. So hopefully this will get over with. People can get back to working. I don't want to see anybody being financially strained, scared, wondering where their next check's coming from. That's not fun. At the end of the day, we're all still human beings. But people don't want to talk like this. The big thing to do is to get on there and point out stuff and attack people. And I'm just like, what is the end game here? What are we hoping to accomplish? What are we wanting? You know what I mean? What is everybody wanting? It's like it's turned into a business with marketing that I have never seen before, which is amazing. And there are people making big money if they're not working for DC and Marvel. It blows my mind. They're doing their own thing. Again, I wouldn't slight them a bit. I don't slight them a bit. They have the skills and the talent and the foresight to see that there's an audience there, and they're not doing it for the love of comics. They're doing it to stick a middle finger at the big two, and mostly the creators that have made their own monsters, if you will. So I just want to get that off my chest. I might do a live show and put this up, and we're going at close to 20 minutes here, and that's enough. But yeah, the state of comics, it is so far off from what comics used to be as an entertainment and an escapism. And it's really going to cause me to really probably change my content a bit on this channel and stuff. I can either keep up with the news, keep up with what's going on there, or I can step away from it, get rejuvenated, and do some of the ideas I have in my head. Those videos take off or not, I enjoy doing YouTube. Uh, and I've always been kind of contrary to begin with. I've never really gone along with the fads and the trends and stuff. What was going on now, and if there's anything I can say, this is a fad and a trend that's going on, a flash in the pan. I've always said that as you go into each new decade, culture changes, and we've had something happen that guarantees things will never be the same again.